Okay, thank you very much, Kelly. Good morning. Welcome to Senate Corporations. The good chairman has some bills around the building, and he'll be chasing those this morning, so we only have him for a few moments. And Senator Barlow likewise is chasing some bills around, trying to make sure they get through those difficult House committees over there. So welcome. We're gonna work our way through this list and hopefully keep enough of us senators up here to vote these out today. And Representative Walters, would you like to come forward and get us started this morning on House Bill 284, Collection Agency Regulation Debt Buyers? Morning, Representative.
Good morning, Senators and Mr. Chairman and Mr. Vice Chairman. I appreciate your time this morning. So, Mr. Chairman, before you today is House Bill 284, Collection Agency Regulation Debt Buyers. The purposes of this bill is to clarify that Collection Agency Board shall license the debt buyers. Currently, there's 35 states that do this. And really, what occurred is about 20 years ago when we started regulating collection agencies and created the Collection Agency Board, we left a little loophole or a little confusion in the fact that debt buyers were not included as who needed to be licensed. And so for the last 20 years or so, the Collection Agency Board, which is a board under the Division of Banking, would just issue a letter of exemption to the debt buyers. Well, then about a year ago, 18 months ago, the board received notice that maybe they didn't have the authority to actually issue a letter of exemption to debt buyers. And so they have, even in just their most recent monthly meeting, the collection agency said, yes, we want this legislation and like the legislation to be able to have the authority to license these debt buyers. And so we can, if you'd like, I'd go to the bill itself, Mr. Chairman. And on page 2, line 14, we bring in the ability of the agency, which is the Collection Agency Board, to license the debt buyers by adding subsection G15. And then we go on to define what is a debt buyer. And then on page 3, we recognize that the civil actions and arbitrations filed before the effective date of this bill would be exempt. And so that just gives time for those actions to be taken care of and new actions going forward. I'd note that, and so what is the difference? I guess I should back up, so the debt buying, or the difference between a collection agency and a debt buyer is really who owns the title to the debt. So the debt buyer actually owns the title to the debt, whereas a collection agency is out looking to collect for somebody. So that's really the difference. Both of them should be licensed so that at least the state knows who they are and what they're doing. And then also, they both abide by the Fair Debt Collections Act, which is a federal act from the 1990s. It really is a consumer protection act to make sure that the debtor is not harassed by the collection agency or by the debt buyer. So just to protect that consumer in that regard. And so that's the real high level. I can answer any more questions. I know there's folks here in the audience that can answer questions at least as well as I can, probably better. But again, it clarifies some confusion in is there the authority to license these folks, and the desire is by the industry to license these folks. And so this just makes sure that they can be licensed. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would answer any questions or move on.
Representative, thank you. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, could you enlighten me a little more as to what the practical consequences of this bill are for somebody who's engaged in this debt buying business and for somebody who has debt that this person has bought?
Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Starting with the last question first, for somebody who has debt that has been purchased, I would say there would be no change in current practice that's going on today, because that's on the other side of the equation. To your first question, how would it be different than what is going on today? And I guess I would have to back up to say 18 months ago. It would be no different than what was occurring 18 months ago, in that these debt buyers would be going to the agency, the agency would recognize who they are and then issue a letter of exemption. Through this bill, they would go to the agency, they'd be recognized for who they are, and they'd be registered and licensed. There's been this window of about the last year or 18 months where there's been a little gray area. The agency knows who they are, but they aren't issuing a letter of exemption saying you don't need to be licensed, but they're also not issuing a license of any kind. And so this would make sure that, yes, we know who you are, and yes, we acknowledge who you are. Existing practice would essentially be held at status quo. It would just be held at status quo, knowing that the agency has the ability to actually offer that license.
Senator, you good? Any other questions? Any other questions of the sponsor? Go ahead, Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I've actually had some experience with the collection agency board at one time. I thought they did a great job, and so would licensure under this give the holder of the debt, the person that incurred the debt, some protection from collection practices akin to with other collection agencies?
Representative?
Mr. Chairman, I might have to phone a friend on that one.
Okay.
That's getting a little past where this bill really addresses, I think, so.
Yeah, we found a friend for you. He came up right here. So, Mr. Pickard, good morning. Please introduce yourself officially.
Thank you,
for us.
Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dave Pickard. I'm representing the Receivables Management Association International. This is the trade association that represents the third-party debt buyers. And this is really, as Representative Walters said in his explanation of the bill, this is a cleanup of a conflict that existed with different opinions within the collection agency board and within some of their advisors out of the AG's office, as I understand it. And I apologize, Vice Chairman Landon, if Chairman Case would reiterate his question, I'll answer it.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pickard, I'm just kind of wondering, by including these debt buyers in this act like this, does that offer protection to consumers in any way?
Go ahead, Mr. Pickard.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chairman, Chairman Case, it does. So the way the debt buyers have been operating, they have always wanted to be licensed. And as Representative Walters mentioned, the challenge has been this conflict of whether they are allowed to be licensed under our statutes. This bill will clarify that difference of opinion there for going on the last 20 years or so. But what it also does, all of these third-party debt buyers and debt buyers abide by the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. And it also, as they operate in the state of Wyoming collecting third-party debts, they operate under all of our existing laws and under the Federal Trade Commission laws, FDCPA, so on and so forth. So it really is a consumer protection bill. It does extend that. And what it really is clarifying is that since there has been this difference of opinion for the last couple of decades, the real portion of the bill that's important, the second page clearly brings in a definition of the debt buyer, and then it says that the collection agency shall license the debt buyers. But one of the practical reasons that this bill is before you is that as debt buyers, as Representative Walters mentioned, the transfer of that debt from a collection agency to a debt buyer becomes that asset, and they are then legally able to go out and pursue the collection of that debt. It is an asset, and what has happened over the course of the last couple of years is there's been some ambiguity on whether or not judgments that have been received and arbitration agreements that have been entered into by debt buyers will stand the test in front of the judicial branch because of the nature of not being licensed. And again, all these other states primarily license third-party debt buyers. Wyoming is one that has had a difference of opinion for many years, and that's where it is being clarified in this. So the real meat of the bill is on page 3, the section 2 of the bill, and that's the most important aspect of it. Because what we need to keep in mind is that, the collection process itself, you have a bona fide debt. Maybe it's a retailer, maybe it's a financial institution. They're unable to collect that debt. They turn it over to a collection agency. The collection agency pursues that debt for a period of time. And then ultimately, there's a diminishing return for the collection agency to continue to work that debt. And they package, all of these debts into a marketable product. And that's what becomes the debt that the debt buyer buys. And it usually is packaged up with several others, and then they continue to do it. So we're really talking about the last resort of a collection process. And ultimately, we're trying to collect those debts for small businesses and institutions in the state of Wyoming. I also have, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, Donald Morris on Zoom. He is outside legal counsel to RMAI, and he'd be able to answer any more specific questions if that was not complete enough.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Case.
That was absolutely great. So it's also true that the debt buying industry is asking for this.
Mr. Vice Chairman, Chairman Case, that is correct.
Thank you, sir.
And if I might add, I know that Representative Walters mentioned it, but when we were in the House committee 2 days before the collection agency boards, and Bradley Chapman, the chairman of the board, was unable to be here today, but they took a vote in their monthly meeting on February 1st and unanimously supported this bill.
So, Mr. Pickard, it seems to me, if I read the bill correctly, that not only does it offer the endorsement of the state, if we license these folks, but it also gives the state a little bit of purview to rescind a license, for example, right? So it's really a two-sided coin for the state.
Mr. Vice Chairman, that is correct. And I would add a little bit more to that as well, and that is it protects the state for the activities that have been in conflict for the last 20 years. These debt buyers have asked to be licensed for the last 20 years by the collection agency board, and were unable to. And that's, as Representative Walters mentioned, that's where they were issuing these certificates of exemption. And there could be a little bit confusion on whether there's even authority to issue those. So really it is a nice cleanup. It's a good government bill, consumer protection. What else can I hang on it?
Thank you, Mr. Pickard, appreciate it. I think we ought to go to Mr. Morris if he'd like to testify this morning. So Kelly, can you let Mr. Morris into the room with us? He's online, and we'd love to hear from someone from the industry.
I am here.
Mr.
Good
Morris,
morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, respected members of the committee.
good
My name is
morning to
Donald.
you.
Good
Go
morning.
ahead, Mr. Morris.
My name is Donald Maurice. I am the outside counsel to the Receivables Management Association International. It's a trade association composed of 650 members, which are banks, non-bank lenders, debt buyers, and the companies that support them, like collection agencies, attorneys, and others in the receivables management process. And we support this legislation. We believe it is important legislation that would resolve an uncertainty and at no fault of Wyoming or the Collection Agency Board. The Collection Agency Act came into effect in the 1940s. The debt buying industry didn't arise until the S&L crisis, if you all remember, in the 1980s. It was a product of that. It was the bad banks that were folded up they were acquired by the United States. The US government needed to sell the assets, those bad loans, and that's how the debt buying industry was created. But they pretty much, debt collection companies, debt collection agency and debt buyers perform a similar function, that is collecting defaulted debt. And the difference, though, as you heard from Representative Walters and Mr. Pickard, is that debt buyers, though, own the debt they are collecting. Now, interestingly, federal law defines for the Federal Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, a debt buyer is often defined as the same as a debt collector, and thus those federal protections take place in debt buyer activity. The many states that do license debt collectors also will license debt buyers for much the same reason, to afford consumer protection. Wyoming affords consumer protection. The collection agency board can make rules and regulations, can enforce those. By not licensing debt buyers, though, we're concerned. We're concerned because it creates a huge loophole for bad actors. Bad actors can collect the same debt as a third-party collection agency and say they're not subject to licensure because they own the debt. We want to close that loophole, and we encourage states to adopt legislation that closes that loophole and brings debt buyers within the regulatory authority that the state already has. That's why we support this bill. It's needed to protect consumers. It's needed to protect the performing compliant companies that are members of RMAI, and we encourage passage of it. Thank you. I'm open for any questions you have.
Mr. Maurice, thank you. And I apologize for mispronouncing your name when you first got on screen with us this morning. Any questions, committee, for Mr. Maurice? Thank you very much. Very helpful this morning. Thanks for being here. Mr.
Pleasure.
Maurice.
Thank you.
All righty. Gentlemen, I'm going to go to other testimony. Stand by if you would. Anyone else want to testify on House Bill 284 this morning? Is there any other testimony? Is there anybody else, Kelly, waiting online this morning? Okay, I'm going to close testimony on House Bill 284. Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill? Moved by Senator Boner. Discussion? Is there any discussion? Debbie, would you please take roll on House Bill 284?
Senator Barlow? Aye. Senator Boner? Aye. Senator Scott?
Aye.
Chairman Case?
Chairman Case left an aye vote.
And Vice Chairman Landon?
Aye.
Have 5 ayes and 0 noes.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. House Bill 284 has passed the Senate Corporations Committee. Mr. Sponsor, we're going to take it upstairs and we'll see how it goes up there. Nicely done.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay, so we're gonna switch the order just a little bit this morning to accommodate the representative who is the prime sponsor on both these bills. We're gonna go with House Bill 148 as the next bill for consideration committee. Representative Walters, take us through the purpose and walk us through House Bill 148, please.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee. House Bill 148 is really a tightening of action that the legislature took a year ago. So if you think of liquor licenses in a community, there's a pool of liquor licenses for a full retail license, and it's based on population. And so a year ago, we said we will carve out outside of that pool of licenses for airports, commercial airports, a single liquor license for those commercial airports to have at their airport. And really the reason for that was a lot of these commercial airports only have 1 or 2 flights a day. And so to expect an entrepreneur to be able to operate a bar or something like that on a couple hours of business just really wasn't realistic. And by asking that airport to get one out of that pool of licenses really takes one out of the community that could be put to better use. And so that all worked well. The other thing that it allowed for was after you go through going through security and going through TSA, you're only allowed to carry 3 ounces of liquid. But if you wanted to take home for example, a novelty bottle of Wyoming whiskey or something of that nature, you couldn't carry that through TSA, and you didn't want to put it in your packed luggage for fear of it being broken. It would allow for that liquor to be sold on the other side of security so that you could take that novelty type of product home to remember your good time in the state of Wyoming. So that cleaned that up. But the issue is there's an opportunity for this license to be gamed and open a full retail liquor license somewhere or store somewhere else on an airport. And that was never the intent of the bill. The intent was to be in the commercial terminal, to help the passengers, to help them take that novelty bottle home with them, or to help them enjoy a drink just before boarding or an airplane, just as they sit and relax, and not take that license out of the pool so that the rest of the community could continue to operate. So if you go to page 2 of the bill, Mr. Chairman, starting on line 3 and through line 6, it just defines that this liquor license will be used inside only in the terminal building and is connected to the concourse of an airport where persons engaged in commercial air travel transfer on and off the aircraft. And so it just tightens that language up to say, hey, this is the terminal building where the commercial air traffic is taking place. And that was the original intent of the bill. And I would also offer, there's been some questions this year on this about the FBO, the flight-based operations, which is really where you would go if you were using a charter aircraft type of business. And I don't believe that is necessary, because in a charter aircraft situation, there is no limitation on what you can take on and off the airplane other than what your charter company, or if you own the plane, you can take whatever you want on your own airplane. So for example, you could hop on with a loaded gun, a bomb, whatever you wanted. That's your prerogative on that side of the business. So the need, and if you're wanting to take that custom novelty bottle with you, you can pick it up at the liquor store, carry it right in your hand. There's no security. There's no 3-ounce requirements. There might be a weight requirement on the airplane, but that's for you and your pilot to arm wrestle over, not for anyone else to really have a concern with. And that's why we didn't bring in the opportunity to do that over at a flight-based operations or an FBO. This was always intended to be just for the commercial terminal, and so this just tightens it up to make sure everyone knows that this is just for that commercial terminal, and that was the purpose of the bill. So with that, Mr. Chairman, it's a short, sweet little bill. Happy to answer any questions if there are any further questions, and thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate it. We do, I think, remember last year running that bill. In fact, I co-sponsored on this side, if I remember correctly. Any questions of the sponsor this morning? Anything? Let's, if you don't mind sitting back for just a moment, Representative, in case we have another quick question before you go. I do want to go to other testimony on 148, House Bill 148. Further testimony. Good morning, Mr. Moser.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. Mike Mosier, Wyoming State Liquor Association. We support this legislation. We worked with the bill sponsor as well as the liquor division on the initial bill last year to come up with the language. As a clarification, we'd originally looked at the idea of a bar and grill. You probably had enough about bar and grills this year already, and decided after hearing from an individual who you might know that has an establishment at the airport in the northwestern corner of the state, that he does quite a lot of packaged liquor sales. People wanting to bring a memento back from Wyoming, stuff like that. So we made it a full retail. However, as the good bill sponsor mentioned, it was done for economic development reasons to help the airport out. In the particular case that the bill sponsor alluded to, it was a packaged liquor store completely on the other side of the runway. That is not the intent of this bill, and we feel that in this case, the sideboards are needed. One of the things, and it's been brought up in testimony, that there's an individual sitting here, in fact, in this chair, that had a pretty successful bar and restaurant at an airport. The difference is I had a bar and restaurant at the airport, not an airport bar and restaurant. The vast majority of our business was from outside of the airport, and I owned my own full retail liquor license. So I was not competing with small businesses on an unfair playing field with a free liquor license. We feel, and we've supported in the past, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, expansion or creation of new types of liquor licenses for civic centers, large rodeos, expansion for golf courses. We support those because they specifically target an issue. And that's what this airport liquor license was about, was allowing airports to have those full retail liquor licenses. So as such, we feel that this bill is important. Just kind of hone it down and say that's what this is for. We didn't think it would be needed, but it is needed. And I appreciate your consideration, and I will take any questions.
Any questions, committee, for Mr. Moser? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So did I understand from the testimony, and maybe it was said by the bill sponsor, this actually will impact a current operation right now, should this pass into law? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chairman, Senator Barlow, not an operating one. There's just plans. There's just been an application put in. So there won't be anybody that's going to be derailed by this.
Okay. Any other questions, committee? Mr. Moser, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to other testimony on House Bill 148, Airport Liquor Licenses Amendment. House Bill 148. Any further testimony? Do we have anyone online, Ellie? So nobody? Okay, thank you very much. We're going to close testimony on House Bill 148. Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill? Senator Scott moved the bill. Is there anything on the bill, committee? All right. Debbie, would you take roll, please, on House Bill 148?
Senator Barlow. Senator Boner. Senator Scott.
Aye.
Chairman Case.
Chairman Case left a conflict on the bill.
And Vice Chairman Landon.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes and 1 conflict and 0 noes.
Okay, thank you very much, Debbie. That House Bill 148 has passed the Corporations Committee, and that too will go upstairs. I'm looking at the prime sponsor. Do you have that senator who's listed here? Is he kind of planning on taking this one? Okay, we will certainly, we'll back him up, Representative. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good day. Okay, next bill for our consideration is House Bill 134, alcohol sales to licenses. And the Liquor Division is here. And Mr. Moser, maybe you could go ahead and come forward if you don't mind, because you might be able to help. And Mr. Pickard is here.
Mr. Chairman.
So we got the A-team. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I mentioned to you earlier this morning, Representative Nemec was not able to be here today. He's enlisted myself and these folks to present the bill, but I think in the interest of time, we'll get right to the experts on it. Certainly on the floor, I'll be carrying the bill if that's the pleasure of the chairman and the committee, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Barlow, I did not mean to overlook you, and I apologize. We visited half an hour ago or so, and you're certainly welcome to offer any thoughts on the bill, or we can go directly to these guys.
Mr. Chairman, I think that I will point out that the bill is introduced. There has been some modifications which actually simplify, streamline, and hopefully improve particularly the excise collection. I think that's probably the prime reason why the adjustments were made. The heart of the bill remains the same, basically access to local products in a limited amount. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. Well, let's go to our Liquor Division to start off the morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom Montoya, Wyoming Department of Revenue Liquor Division. House Bill 134 engrossed is very simple. Senator Barlow is correct. The adjustments made in the other side there was a excise tax collection issue. So this was simplified. Representative Nemec was totally on board with the adjustments. These 2 guys worked with him totally on it, and I helped them a bit. But really what it does is just simplify. In 2019, the legislature passed a bill that would allow retailers, liquor retailers of any kind of a license, to be able to purchase up to 9 liters, which is 1 case of 12 750 milliliter bottles of a liquor from a package store. What was happening throughout the state is a local bar or local restaurant, maybe a private club, would run out on a Friday night of a product that was selling quite well. And of course, they couldn't order from the Liquor Division until Monday, which means they probably wouldn't get their stuff until Tuesday. So they would go across the street or down the street to a local package store and buy some. But that was a violation of law. So Mr. Mosier and his group asked the legislature to allow up to 9 liters to be sold in those instances. And they have to do some paperwork, and it's worked out really well, and we've had no issues with it in the time period that has happened. What this bill does is to allow a satellite manufacturers, and now these are the retail stores that a manufacturer or a rectifier that is licensed by the liquor division, and it's just the retail store that allows them to sell their own products. And they can do the same thing now under this bill, should it pass, is to sell up to 9 liters to another retailer in case they run out on a Friday night or whatever. And that's really all this bill does.
Okay, Mr. Montoya, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Montoya? So just to clarify, this satellite retailer, is it necessarily a distiller or a brewer, or could it be any other retailer?
Mr. Vice Chairman, a satellite retailer must first hold a manufacturer's license from the Wyoming Liquor Division. That allows them to either be a distiller or a rectifier, okay? And then they would go to a local licensing authority to get a satellite manufacturing permit. And also, they're allowed 2 of those now. For instance, the one we're all familiar with and was mentioned today, Wyoming Whiskey, they have one in Kirby and they have one in Jackson. So those are their retail stores that sells their product only. Now, if this bill were to pass, they would be able to sell to a local retailer that ran out of their product on a Friday night or whatever.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that. Let's go to Mr. Moser first and then to Mr. Pickard. How about that? Good morning again.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and committee. It's been so long. Mike Mosier, Wyoming State Liquor Association. We support this legislation. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Wyoming Distillers Guild, who also supports this legislation. Those are all the distillers and rectifiers in the state. So we're all on board on this one. Originally, this bill was supposed to come up Tuesday. I thought it was kind of sad it didn't because it was Valentine's Day, and it's hard not to love this bill. We
Oh, my gosh, yeah. Yeah, we're going to clear the vote here pretty
Sorry,
quickly.
am I going to get a gavel for that, Mr. Vice Chairman? Mr. Pickard and his spirits brokers worked with us. The big concern we had, and Mr. Pickard can get into more detail on this, is we believe in the 3-tiered system. We do not want to make it so retailers making a wholesale purchase. We also want to ensure that the 17.6% markup and those excise taxes are paid, which they are in a regular retail to retail, which was legalized, as Mr. Montoya mentioned. And so it does that. It fits in with the same context. So it's really Senate File 113 plus, 11, 12 manufacturer satellites. The distillers support it because another case, for example, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, is say I'm a retailer, well, I used to be, I'm a retailer and I'm visiting Casper, and I go to the distillery and they have a fun little product. And I buy a couple bottles legally through this system, go back, put it on my shelf, and if it starts selling, I'll start buying it from the liquor division. Now, one of the questions that came up on the House side that I think it's important to address is I was asked if it would develop a little cottage industry with retailers going to distillery satellites and buying. That won't happen anymore than it does with retail to retail. You'll do a couple bottles, but on the other hand, if you're buying it from a manufacturer's satellite, you're buying 17.6 plus excise tax plus retail markup. And so if you buy a whole case, you just get 17.6 and excise tax. So if you're running your business like that, you probably won't be in business for long. So it's mostly just, if you run out, if you want to try something a little different, just Wyoming distilleries, it's a happy little bill, and I'll take any questions.
Senator Scott.
Refresh my memory, what's a rectifier?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott and Mr. Montoya would be more qualified to answer that. But it's kind of the same thing. They both deal in spirits. The difference is a rectifier gets the spirits and puts stuff in it. So they're both spirits manufacturers. They just do it in a different way. A distiller actually makes the spirits. Is that adequate?
Mr.
Go ahead,
Vice
Mr.
Chairman,
Montoya.
Senator Scott, Mr. Moser is correct. They'll just take a neutral grain spirits, and they usually purchase it from some big distiller out of state. And they'll put spices or fruits or whatever they may be and develop their own liqueur, limoncello, whatever it may be. As a matter of fact, Coltisca's here in Sheridan first started out as a rectifier. It was an old family recipe that they were making for friends at Christmas, and everybody loved it. And so they started doing that, and then Coltisca's decided, you know, it was a lot smarter if we distill our own product because it would be cheaper. And the two Coltisca boys went and started, they went to distilling school, and they bought their own distiller, and now they're their own still, and now they're distilling themselves. But yeah, rectifier just adds whatever to neutral grain spirits.
Thank you, Mr. Montoya. Any other questions? Senators, let's go to Mr. Pickard. Good morning.
Good morning again, Mr. Vice Chairman, Dave Pickard, currently representing the Wyoming Spirits Brokers Association. And you might not be familiar with us. We have operated on the House side on a lot of liquor bills over the last couple of years, especially in the discussions under the COVID, kind of dealing with a lot of these alcohol issues. What we are the spirits brokers that represent the wholesalers in the wholesale tier of the three-tier system. And Mr. Chairman, we did work closely with Representative Nemec on this bill. We brought a couple of amendments that are included in the engrossed copy that is before you. We fully support the bill. I wanted to just make that introduction, say that we were involved on the House side, and then I did share with you a brochure that you'll see many times, although this committee is very well familiar with the purpose of the three-tier system, and that's really to protect the consumer. You know, we are talking about a dangerous product. We're not talking about potato chips. So the state of Wyoming and all other states have chosen to regulate this product, and that was the purpose of us coming to the table with Representative Nemec to make sure that it did not erode it at any way the three-tier system. And as Mr. Mosier pointed out, this is not going to start a cottage industry of a manufacturer violating that three-tier system, because it is a very small quantity, and it would not be appropriate from a business standpoint to paying much more for your product when you can buy it from our friend over here at the liquor division for less. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
So, Mr. Pickard, it just seems to me like I like the piece of it where, a business can come across to our distillers or rectifiers and buy a little bit of product to just get it on the shelf and test it out. And it seems to me that a wholesaler group would like that opportunity to, any way they can, to get their product out there. So that's kind of a win, it seems to me.
Oh, Mr. Vice Chairman, that's precisely the reason that Representative Nemec brought the bill. He recognized that in constituents that he has over in his district, and that's precisely what the effect of this bill would be. I mean, it's not going to provide a lot of harm. It's going to provide a lot of good for the scenario that Mr. Mosier mentioned, and you did too.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Pickard. Anything? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it very much. House Bill 134, alcohol sales to licensees. Any other testimony in the room this morning on this bill? House Bill 134? Is there anyone online wishing to testify on 134? Maybe the next one. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, committee, I'm going to close testimony on House Bill 134. What's your pleasure? Senator Barlow moved the bill. Is there any other discussion on this bill? Debbie, would you take roll on House Bill 134, please?
Senator Barlow? Aye. Senator Boner? Aye. Senator Scott?
Aye.
Chairman Case?
Conflict?
And Vice Chairman Landon.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes, 0 noes, and 1 conflict.
Okay, House Bill 134 has passed the Corporations Committee, and that will go upstairs. Senator Barlow will be right behind you on this one. Okay. Let's move on to House Bill 144 this morning. Committee, Senior Citizen District Programs and Services. I'm looking out to see if any of the sponsors are here this morning. Okay, thank you, Senator Boner. Appreciate that. You are welcome to stay right where you're at if you'd like. House Bill 144.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have House Bill 144 here. It arises out of a challenge, you can say, in my neck of the woods, where we have a brand-new senior citizens district that is looking to hopefully, provide more services, and is currently constrained by statute in order to do so. As you can imagine, in Commerce County, the mill levy raises quite a bit of money, and so they're sitting on, I think, about $8 million in reserves and looking for a way to actually put that taxpayer dollars to good use. And so that's the reason for the bill, is simply looking to expand, like I said, expand the services that a senior citizens district can offer. And but we'll have an amendment here, and there's quite a bit of apparently discussion in the House as to, we didn't want to make it too permissive, because the concern in other parts of the state, especially very eastern Wyoming, was that, if you're in an area where your mill levy doesn't raise a whole lot, they don't want their boards just to go crazy and be unable to, provide the basic services that they already provide. So what you see here between the engrossed version and the proposed amendment, I think, is a pretty decent compromise that addresses everybody's concerns. So, Mr. Chairman, you'll see on page 2, I think really page 2, line 10, you'll see kind of the pretty good summary of the bill. You can really, expanding what a senior citizen district can do beyond programs and services to improving facilities, including operational expenses, utilities, other recurring expenses. Page 2, line 19, you'll see mental health, dementia services expanding into that area. And then on the bottom of page 2, they can also start helping out with assistance to income-based or income-restricted housing facilities that are for senior citizens. And so you see that also includes maintenance costs, upgrades to address code or safety issues. All these are challenges that we have in our neck of the woods, and I think are good uses of these public funds. The part of the compromise, I guess, in the other chamber was that they're not going to, you'll see this on section 2, the board isn't just going to go out and change, the amount of services that they can provide without getting the voters' approval first. And so that's what got it out of the House. We have some amendments that further refine and allow other districts and parts of the state, like such as mine, that would rather have the opportunity to go out and take care of these, issues with complying with code, these safety issues. We'd rather have the opportunity to do that right now and not wait 2 to 4 years. So that's what the amendment is about. And so I can switch over to that, Mr. Chairman, if nobody has any questions on the bill itself.
Any questions on the bill thus far, committee? Go ahead, Senator Scott.
Is there a limitation on the number of mills that can be authorized?
I think it's 2 mills, and right now that's the max. And I've said it privately, I've said it publicly. I think that our local senior citizen board needs to lower their mills. And so I think that's the plan. But for now, I mean, if we don't do anything, that money's just going to sit there and it's never going to be spent. So this is meant to, provide some more flexibility. Philosophically, I trust local boards. Apparently not everybody does, so I don't have any problem with giving them more authority. But so we're just trying to make sure we account for everybody's concerns here. So
Senator, before we go to the amendment, and we want to do that here shortly, but was there any discussion, any concern about, as we expand what these districts can do, any concern about competition with the private market? Did that ever come up, or are we just kind of in a different place with it and we're not going to have that kind of conflict?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I think you'll see with the language that we have provided, it's limited to entities that are already under some sort of government control, whether it be, and it gets a little complicated in terms of what entities are currently providing these services, but a lot of nonprofits that are, controlled by a local board. And so you won't see in here any, if that competition is there, it already exists as it is. So.
Okay, thank you. Senator, do you want to walk us through the amendment then?
Yes.
It's substantial, so.
Yes, it is. So like I said, we need to do a little bit of work to make sure that, everybody's concerns were taken into account. And so on the amendment, you'll see that on line 12, you'll see, I think that's just kind of a cleanup saying, a district can propose on a ballot to, expand their services. It gives them authority. I think, like I said, that's a good catch by our staff. Page 2, line 16. So like I said, this is something that's already provided sometimes by the, by the local or under the supervision of the local board or some sort of nonprofit corporation that works with them. So, so we have continuation there. I think the biggest one we're looking at here is on page 3, line 3. Which further clarifies who would qualify. And here you see a nonprofit corporation. Actually, I have an amendment to the amendment, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman. And instead, so on that page 3, line 3, in the amendment, strike under contract with the government entity and insert controlled by a local board of directors.
Can you say that one more time, Senator?
Yeah, so
we're on line 27?
Yeah,
of the
line
amendment?
28.
Line 28
So-
of the amendment. And okay, let's track that,
Yep.
track in your,
Strike under contract with a government entity
okay?
and insert controlled by a local board of directors.
Okay. We'll,
And then I think really the new language on the second page of the amendment is, I think it will alleviate some of our concerns there. It gives an opportunity for a district to, expand these services before the next election if they comply with the following requirements, Roman 1 through 4. And basically they have to have a public hearing, it has to be noticed. They have to have more than 4 million in reserves. The idea being that, once again, the concern here is that, you don't want a district with a smaller tax base to go out and expand their services and then not being able to provide some of the services that they were providing. And so I think that paragraph 4 really, alleviates everybody's concerns and draws a clear distinction there of what we're trying to accomplish without negatively affecting anybody else. So that's the amendment.
any concerns, Senator, that level's that high for some of our smaller communities out there?
Mr. Chairman, that alleviates their concerns, because once again, their concern was that, their local board would just go out and start, spending money on stuff that they frankly couldn't afford. And so that's why that's there. So that's specifically meant to deal with the concerns of some of the smaller districts.
Okay. Any questions on the proposed amendment? Senators?
Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Not quite sure it's on the amendment or the bill, but it looks to me like what we're trying to do is where there's basically a mineral boom going on and there's plenty of money available. We're allowing these boards to expand what they do. what's the chance we're gonna get them in trouble when the mineral boom declines or is over and there isn't that kind of revenue?
Senator?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd point out that most of the expansions here are, one-time expenditures or stuff for, doing infrastructure type stuff, dealing with the buildings. And so I think that this is a good opportunity to, take care of these one-time expenses while times are good. And boy, everybody in Commerce County is well familiar with the boom and bust cycle. Like I said, philosophically, I have a tendency of trusting our local boards to not make silly decisions.
Okay. Senator, anything else before we go to any other testimony on the bill? Okay, and we'll take up the proposed amendment when the time comes. Senator Barlow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to be clear, so the way I understand current statute, it's 2 years after the first initial approval of the district, there's a reapproval at an election, and then it's every 4 years thereafter. So this is what we're actually going to is those monies you would have to either make the proposition by ballot at one of those successive elections. Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify that's where we are. And the mill levy cannot be changed more than 2 mills, period, or greater than 2 mills, period. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that, Senator. Thank you. Go ahead, Senator Boner.
Yeah, that's correct. Max 2 mills in every 4 years. So.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. Thank you very much. Is there anyone here this morning that wants to testify on House Bill 144? Yeah, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, I'm seeing ghosts.
Yeah. How about that? There's some familiarity, but please introduce yourselves. And for the record, we have people online this morning too, and they want to know who we are. So thank you for coming forward. Good to see everyone. Take it away.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I'm William Tibbs from Converse County. I'm a private citizen that saw a problem and decided to use some of my prior experience, which was acquired here in this body across the hall, but to work on a problem. And so I'll give you a brief history if that's okay. Our board wound up with a lot of money because of the oil fill that's happening, and it was not intentional on their purpose. Since then, they have cut the mill levy back, and they intend to do that again. Not to, we're not just trying to rake in money, but it happened. And so the apartment complexes that are adjacent to our senior center had come to the board and asked for money to help with like an elevator replacement that those apartments operate on a very thin margin. So they didn't have any money to do it. And they came to the board, and the board said, well, we don't know if we can do that or not. And actually they'd done some kitchens and they didn't know if they could do that or not. So they'd gone to the county attorney and he's going, I don't know, that it says one thing over here and it says something else over here. And so I read through the statute and I go, I'm confused too. And so what we've attempted to, we met with several representatives of the boards that are involved in our senior programs in Converse County and sat down and said, okay, what are senior services? And so we came up with the fact that the building itself is definitely a part of our senior program. And so we need to keep the building up. But the statute said you can't do capital construction. So we're blocked on that. So you got your programs and services and we're okay with that. They could do that. And then we had the apartments. We have 4 buildings in Converse County that are HUD subsidized senior citizen housing, and they all operate on a thin margin and they need things done, and we got the money to do it. So we determined that there were 3 categories of senior services, and that's the 3 categories that you see in this bill. So we didn't think about some other things that came up. And so we brought the bill, and it ran into some opposition. County up in the northeast corner of the state had just passed theirs, and they'd promised their citizens that they would only do services And here we're coming with these other two categories, and they're going, we'll never get this through next time. So we looked at that and came up with the idea that we give the board, before it goes on the ballot, the choice of which one of those three categories of services they want to use. And they put that on the ballot, it's voted on, and that's what they're tied to till the next election. Then thinking about that, setting up a new district, the mill levy is approved in the primary, but the board's not elected till the general. So the board couldn't put on what they wanted it to be. So whoever brought it forward, which would be the county commissioners, would have to determine the categories that they wanted to be on the ballot, okay? So we put that in, and that's what part of these amendments are about. There is an amendment made by, on the services in the House, and the amendment made it so that it was only expansion of existing services. And so that's what some of this language is correcting in on page 2, line 16 and 17. It makes it so that it's existing services, expansion of existing services, or new services. And also amended in, not in this amendment, but mental health and that type of thing was amended in as can be part of a service. We hadn't thought about the fact, well, I had in my mind, but I didn't put it down when we were working on the bill, that the voters need to vote on it. And so that came up in the House, and that amendment got put in. And then it's like, well, we've got all this money and we got a lot of projects and we need to be able to use it in the next 18 months. So that's what Brian was explaining to you, that we came up with the idea of having a public hearing on it so that the voters had an opportunity to have input. And that will only last until the next election. That will go away then. Our goal, my goal with this, is working on this, is so that a board that's administering this money can sit down with the statute and say, okay, we need to do this, and it says right here we can do it, and then vote to go do it. So I want the boards to be able to understand the statute and to not have to go seek legal counsel every time to find out if they think they can do the project. So we're trying to simplify this, make it work for everybody in the state. We started out with our problem in Converse County, but we've accommodated all the objections that came up, and I think it's a much better bill than we started out with.
Representative, good to see you.
Thank you.
It's good to have you home in the Capitol. And a lot of work has gone into this to get it over here and to this point. I assume that you not only participated, but you're okay with this proposed amendment that we through it.
I actually gave Brian the list.
Okay, well, that's good.
And then he sent me the draft, and I went back through the engrossed copy, and everything except what he amended was exactly the way we wanted it. So,
Okay, appreciate that. Any questions of the good representative before we go to his colleagues? Ma'am, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name's Ann Clement. I'm here with the Wyoming chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. It's nice to see you all again this morning on yet another community bill that will expand services for those Wyomingites that are suffering from Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. So we're obviously very much in support of the inclusion of the dementia services. We're facing what they're lovingly calling is a silver tsunami as the baby boomers age, and those services that are provided by healthcare providers that may or may not be there right now, we could certainly attract them with the ability to otherwise provide training for memory care services in these districts. So we're very supportive of the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions about the kinds of potential programs or services that we could offer, but the connection within the community would be wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Clement, thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you so much for being here. We reserve the right to come back with a question a little bit later if you're going to be here. Sir, take it away. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm Don Larson. I represent the 5-member senior district board in Converse County. And I was elected in November, and one of the first things I learned upon being elected was that we had a pool of money and no way to spend it. The board has been in place for 4 years, coming on 5 years now, and they had been struggling with that the first 4 years. In fact, they had people resign and be replaced over that first 4-year period because they just couldn't resolve some of those issues. When I came on board in November, I told them I would step up and help with trying to get this resolved. And I met with Mr. Tibbs, and he was started on a process. One of the things we've found in going through the community is that when people voted on this special district initially, the common thought was that it was for all senior services, not just the senior center. And that's what we're trying to do now, is to be able to deal with more senior services and accommodate the people. I hear statistics now and then that Converse County has a large and growing population of senior citizens, and we'd like to be able to address that. I met with a number of doctors, both in the community and in Casper, and asked them what kind of services they thought we needed, and every one of them hit on dementia. That's a big problem. It's not just Alzheimer's. Dementia has many facets. And so we want to address that specifically in our expansion of services. With that, I'd be willing to take any questions.
And I believe you said Mr. Larson, is that correct?
Lursen, L-U-H-R-S-E-N.
Okay, Mr. Larson, thank you so much for being here, and appreciate you stepping up to serve on that board up there. Any questions? Any questions, committee? Thank you all very much. We may come back to you. Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
If I may interject, we are sitting right now, we had a board meeting on Monday. We're sitting on $8.8 million, and our current mill levy is 1.52. And as a board, we've been talking about the need to reduce that. And the number we're contemplating is 0.75. And also 80% of our funding comes from oil and gas. That was a question we needed to research after going through the House. So,
Thank you for that. We are familiar with that percentage. We talk about that quite a bit down here. So thank you, Mr. Larson. Appreciate it. All three of you, thanks. I want to go to other testimony on House Bill 144. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to testify? Representative, I keep looking back your direction. Representative Knapp, you good this morning? Okay, it's good. Okay, it's good to see you, by the way. Okay, anybody online who would like to testify on this bill? Okay. Let's have the commissioner dial in and turn on some video and audio. And Commissioner, good morning.
Good morning, Senator Landon. Thank you for letting me join in this morning. Converse County Commissioner Jim Willicks here. Just want to echo the comments that you heard from the others that this is an opportunity to really provide services that I think the voters thought they were voting to provide. You know, the existing language might have even, the language before this bill might have made it even difficult to remodel a kitchen to provide that, meal services, which is a significant part of senior services. If you needed a new bus, could you do that? And so this clearly opens up the avenues. And like Senator Boner, I trust our local boards to make right decisions, to be wise with that money. We did get a big influx of money, and I have talked to a couple of those board members that feel that it's a little too flush. So let's make sure we invest it in long-term projects. And those HUD housing in our senior centers get influx to build them, but the maintenance of them is seldom there in the future. Elevators are expensive, roofs are expensive, and our board has done a great job of investing in some capital things that fit in the box or maybe on the edge of the box. And this really provides some opportunity. And that senior housing, as we talk about housing issues across the state, providing appropriate senior housing, I think is something that should be on the table to be considered, and then let the board make the decision. The amendments that Senator Boner bringing forward, I support because that lets us more quickly get into those before election. And then I fully support letting the voters have a more defined definition of what they're providing at the next election. So just want to appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this from Representative Strzok and Senator Boner particularly. And then I know Representative Tibbs has worked really hard on. So just offer my support and be willing to answer any questions.
Commissioner, always good to see you. Thanks for being here this morning. Any questions of Commissioner Willett? Okay, Commissioner, thank you. Good to see you.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay, anybody else online? Kelly, thank you very much. Committee, I'm going to close testimony.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator Scott.
before we close testimony, I have one question for Representative Strzok.
Representative, my apologies. I should have brought you forward just before the question was asked, but here's Senator Scott with the question.
All right, thank you. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, question is, particularly with these dementia services, ongoing services, when the mineral boom cools off, are we still going to be able to afford them, or is that going to be a problem?
Representative?
Thank you, Senator and Senator Scott. You know, I would say yes, because I'm sure we can. My thought is you cut back on other areas when something else is more important. And I would say that dementia would be a very important thing. And so there's some other ways we could cut costs if we needed to keep that going. Thank you.
Okay, and Representative, I assume that you're good with the amendment, what's in the amendment, and
I am. Thank you, Senator. And yes, I am.
okay, thank you for being here, Representative, appreciate it. Anything else, committee? Okay, now we'll close testimony, and what's your pleasure on the bill? Moved by Senator Barlow, House Bill 144. Senator Boner.
Sure, I move the proposed amendment with the noted changes. Hopefully everybody's understands that. I'll just repeat it just to be sure. So everything's the same except on page 128 of the amendment, strike under contract with the government entity and insert in its place, controlled by a local board of directors.
Okay, just to help make sure that Debbie has this down, we're on line 28, page 1 of the proposed amendment, and we're going to strike the language under contract with a, and on line 29, governmental entity, that is stricken, and we're going to insert controlled by a local board of directors. Debbie, do you have that?
Yes, I
Okay.
do. Thank you.
Committee, are we good with that? Go ahead, Senator Barlow.
So, Mr. Chairman, it seems like we are fundamentally changing what this does, because right now we're talking about a contractual relationship. Now we're talking about a governance component. And I just want to make sure that's what the intent of this is. And like I said, I'm not saying it's wrong. I just want to make sure that truly is what we're doing with this. I mean, I think that's what this amendment does. I just want to make sure that's what we're trying to accomplish. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Boner?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's, it's still, we want to make sure that's locally controlled, so it's not just, any, so we saw that sideboard there, but yes, as making that change to, once again, I think there's like HUD housing, for example, and that's, and we want to make sure that that's covered. Still controlled by a local board, obviously.
So, go ahead, Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just in past different facilities in the community we're talking about. This, of course, has application across the entire state. So I guess what I'm trying to understand, are all of these facilities, these are housing facilities in the state of Wyoming that may be associated, are they all controlled by a local board of directors? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's a good question, Senator. Senator Boner, thoughts on that?
I would imagine that it wouldn't be too terribly different throughout the rest of the state. I imagine this is a, common circumstance, but I'll admit I haven't looked and seen what the circumstances are in other parts of the state. Perhaps somebody else in the room has, but it's my understanding that this is a fairly common
I see the
circumstance.
representative coming forward, and I also see the chairman is back with us and has some good background on all of this. So Senator Case first, and then we'll go to the representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm guessing you have to have a board to impose the mill levy. So that would be the board that we're talking about, is what I would imagine. And so the board, even though the board might contract or provide other services or might somehow do it directly, is that?
Mr. Chairman, to be
Go ahead,
fair, the
Senator
way,
Barlow.
to be from, where the, we're talking about the nonprofit corporation being controlled by a local board of directors, not the district itself. The district certainly is controlled by a local board of, I'm just trying to read the amendment that has now been amended into the bill and make sure that we're not fencing out other entities, other places in the state. It may work for this community. What if it does not work in another community that wants to have the same access? So that's the second question I have, is how many senior care districts are there in the state of Wyoming that this bill impacts, besides the one that's here today advocating for it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So Senator Barlow, I appreciate us digging down here for a minute on this, because you think of little communities. I'm aware of two, for example, Shoshone and DuBois, that have pretty substantial senior services, but I'm not aware of whether or not they are contracted, say, with the municipality to provide those, or are they all board? Let's go to the former representative and then the representative. How about that? Yeah.
We can adopt it and clean it up.
We had
Go ahead.
a lot of discussion on this, and actually we had to discover how our senior housings were set up. And initially in the House, the part of that language was put on in the House, and the fact that the board itself can own housing, I don't ever see that happening. It could. It's early in the bill, that the original language, that they could own property, but I don't see them managing apartments. So in Converse County, we have two apartment buildings, one in Glen Rock and the original one in Douglas downtown, that were done under housing authorities that were authorized by the cities. So the language, the second part of that, when we're dealing with the ownership of these buildings, is that is a governmental entity, and they have a board that owns that building, and there's no private money from outside. It's strictly for senior housing and for that building. And each of these buildings have their own board. So then we have two buildings down by the senior center that were built later that have a different arrangement with HUD, but they're nonprofit corporations. And from my days in insurance and studying different things, a corporation is an entity that can own property. And so that's what these two buildings are owned by, these nonprofit corporations, and they have a local board that manages the corporation, which takes care of the buildings. So we have two situations in Douglas that we had to make sure the language was clear so that we could work with these senior housings that were designated for senior housing. And they do get HUD subsidy. They operate on a thin margin. They don't, for instance, the elevator is say $75,000, and they can set aside $1,700 a month. So it'd take them 10 years, if nothing else came up, to replace an elevator. So that's what we're trying to do with this, is to be able to keep these buildings safe and not become a slum over time because the entity didn't have the money to work with to keep them up. So that's the reason, if we don't have nonprofit corporations, then we got 2 buildings in Douglas that we can't work with.
So Representative, well said, and we totally get that. And we're excited to get arms around and help that community. I think the concern of the senator from Campbell County is, are we making sure that we're not fencing somebody out up in Cody or Du Bois or Farson or someplace else? And that's our concern, is this language, do we fence anybody out? Let's go to Senator Bonner first and then Senator Scott.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a good concern. So I'm wondering if Mr. Tibbs or Representative Strzok, if maybe we retain that language under contract with the government entity and simply say, or controlled by a local board of directors, so we keep all those possibilities open.
So Representative, I had the same question. What if we put or in there? And then we handle the governmental entity piece, and then we also handle the board of director piece.
There's no
Would that
contract.
work? And maybe Senator Scott was headed in the same direction. We'll go to him here in a sec.
There's no contract between the apartments and the senior citizen.
So what they're just wondering, so that we don't fence.
Okay, so. Okay, folks, we're gonna go to Senator Scott. I think he had a question. We'll work this a little bit more.
Mr. Chairman, I think the or suggestion is excellent. And the question I had was, where we're dealing with HUD and their regulations, can we not anticipate that the circumstances around the state will be similar to what you're seeing in Converse County, where you could have either entities owning these things?
You know, to the former representative, to Representative Song, I think maybe we've hit on something to try to make sure with this language that we incorporate whatever may exist statewide, because obviously we want to fix Converse County, but we also, don't want to mess something up somewhere else. Does that make sense?
Yes, Vice Chair Landon, it does make a lot of sense. And I think that was part of the problem in the House when we first did this. I mean, the counties were so afraid of messing each other, getting messed up. So I think the language does need to open that up and bring them all into there. But our biggest problem was when they were trying it to protect themselves, they were totally closing our doors. So if we could keep it open, for everybody to feel comfortable, I think that would be the best solutions. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, real quickly, and then we'll go to Senator Barlow. Go ahead, Representative. Once a representative, always a representative, by the way. Tibbs, appreciate it. Go ahead.
It's not the intent of this bill to get tangled up with HUD. The apartment buildings have their own agreements with HUD, and they operate. The only thing we're trying to do with this bill is to help them with their maintenance and the safety on those. So we're not getting involved with their boards take care of all of that. We're just making it so that this mill levy can be used to keep these buildings up so that they don't become slums. So we're not getting all tangled up. And any entity in the state that has subsidized apartments for senior citizens should be able to use this number 3 to help keep those buildings up. That's the only goal of this.
We want to help you to help them, but we also want to make sure that everybody out across the state has a board of directors and is not just primarily linked to a government entity. And so that's the concern here.
And that's been our goal in the changes that we've made, is to make it so everybody can use it.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Representative.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair. We do have a list, and we do have numbers of the different districts, if you would like to that?
Would love to hear from, absolutely.
I'm happy to share,
Please
Mr.
chime
Chair.
in.
I reached out to the audit department to find out who had turned in audits for their districts, just to find out where there were districts located. So there are a total of 10 districts across the state. They're in 9 different counties. So Bighorn has divided themselves into a north and a south district. There are also districts in Lincoln County, Sublette, Fremont, Johnson, Converse, Platte, Crook, Campbell, and Niobrara.
Can you tell us real quickly what the setup is? Are those contracted through government entities like a municipality, or are they all set up as special districts under their own boards?
The way I understand it, they're all set up in the same capacity because they're set up by the current statute that exists.
Okay, thank you. Okay, appreciate it, you guys. Senator Barlow?
Mr. Chairman, I think we're still on the amendment. The amendment's been moved. So, Mr. Chairman, I think, and maybe it's just too wonky. I am very wonky, but what I guess I would suggest is we take the first half of the amendment to the amendment, with that's the striking of under contract with a governmental entity. We keep that strike, but we don't add the new language. So now it would say, the language would say, senior service district, comma, another governmental entity or nonprofit corporation, period. Or excuse me, not period, to provide affordable housing to senior citizens within the district. So all we're doing with that, Mr. Chairman, is taking out that governance issue on the nonprofit. And I think, like I said, I'm not suggesting that there is another form out there, but I think that is a limiter within itself. That's a condition on the nonprofit, and I don't know that we want to go there, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Boner?
I think that works very well, Mr. Chairman.
I do too. So, committee, just make that, that's exactly where I was going. I think that I just heard that that's a friendly amendment to the amendment, but I want to make sure Debbie gets that. So Senator Barlow, could you describe again what we've suggested?
Mr. Chairman, in the amendment, and this is lines 27, 28, and 20, well, starting on line 27 of the amendment, my colleague, Chairman Boner, on line 28 and 29, struck under contract with a governmental entity. So my friendly suggestion is we retain that, and we do not add the additional language, which was the language controlled by a local board of directors, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. So that is, we are retaining the strike, but not adding the new language in its place.
Are we
Thank you,
okay,
Mr. Chairman.
Debbie, we've got that, Kelly? Okay. Okay, let's move on through the rest of the amendment.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator Scott.
I do further think that the suggested language that Senator Barlow has deals with any 16.6 problem that might be.
Okay. Anything else on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Barlow.
Mr. Chairman, I am interested in the $4 million. And while we've heard from a district that has $8+ million in the bank, et cetera, this seems to be another limiter for a district that has much smaller ability to raise levy, even at a full 2. Many counties couldn't raise $1 million over 10 years, or maybe not that long. And so I guess I'm not going to suggest an amendment here, but I think that we should think about that, continue to think about that as, anyway, as something that maybe we should say not more than half of their reserves can be used between the elections or something like that. So all districts would have some access to whatever they have if they didn't meet that minimum or that threshold. And Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to suggest amendment here. I'll let the proponents try to help us understand what those 10 other districts may have or may not have a capacity to do with this new language, because they would want access to this new opportunity as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Barlow, I agree, and I had brought up that $4 million threshold also, and I would suspect that many of those other districts probably don't have that kind of cash in the bank. So And I'm looking at Ms. Clement because you made us aware of those other districts, which I appreciate. Let's work this as we go along. And I'm looking at one of the co-sponsors here and back to Senator Boner. Let's consider that if the bill moves forward, we may want to adjust that language as suggested. Go ahead, Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And actually, the audit numbers will give us some indication of probably where they are financially, one by one. So I don't want to exhaust it right here, but I do think it's something that, this is another fence out probably for every other district in the state, as it stands, would be my bet. But we can find out from the audit numbers. Thank you.
Okay, so Senator Boner, do you want to move the amendment for today?
Yes, I thought I did, but yeah, we'll do it again with the friendly amendment from Senator Barlow.
Do you, do you want to include the suggestion at this point? My thought was that we take this as we go. We've got a couple more readings to go to have the opportunity to do a little homework. So I think my suggestion is we consider the amendment as it stands right now. Okay, all in favor of Senator Boner's motion to adopt the proposed amendment with the modification, please say aye. Aye. Okay, that. Any opposed? No. The proposed amendment has passed. We're on the bill now, senators. What's your pleasure?
Question on the bill.
Okay. Question on House Bill 144. Debbie, please take roll.
Senator Barlow? Aye. Senator Boner? Aye. Senator Scott?
Aye.
Chairman Case?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Landon?
Aye.
5 ayes and 0 noes.
Representative Strzok, thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's assistance on this. Let's keep working it. I think we can tighten her up a little bit and make it a better bill. There you go. Great to see you, Mr. Tibbs. Thank you. Back. Totally get that piece too. We need a governor on the golf cart. We just want to make sure the golf cart can run. So there you go. Let's go back to the good chairman. Good to have you back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good job. Let's go ahead and take up the next bill, House Bill 279. It's a white bill. I think behind the pillar, Representative Knapp. Well, please join us at the front. And Mr. Secretary, if you want to come up too, that'd be great. We can be expeditious. Oh, and Mr. Rubino, you too. We got 3 chairs. Hello, Representative Knapp, welcome. And the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senators, this bill deals with voter registration, and it specifically deals with absentee ballots. When requesting an absentee ballot, having an accepted form of ID, and to provide that to the clerk's office. The accepted forms of ID would be the 10 accepted forms now in registering to vote, and that in essence is the bill.
Okay, questions for Representative Knapp? Representative Knapp, would you mind explaining if you request it by mail versus, or some other way, this applies when you request it in person, is that what I understand?
Mr. Chairman, yes, this covers both requesting in person. If you were to request by mail, you can do so to send it in electronically, and that's the same thing, an accepted form of identification. So whether you were to fax that in or somehow email it, or have some other secured form of delivery.
And thank you. And so what is the purpose of the identification? What do you, just nail down exactly what you're trying to show?
Mr. Chairman, the purpose of the identification is similar to registering to vote. When you request an absentee, we just want to make sure that you are the person that is requesting that absentee ballot. And this would get rid of any type of fraud that could happen with someone coming in and requesting a ballot without actually showing that they're the person that requested that.
And so, Representative Knapp, as I'm trying to think about this, I'm a registered voter, and so I'm, the purpose when you go to the polls, I think, is to say that the person voting is the registered voter, that they're the same. And you mentioned that this is, that the person requesting the absentee ballot is the person that they said they are. That seems a little bit different to me, but I'm not sure.
Mr. Chairman, it is that matching as well, because it's taken into consideration that you've already registered to vote. You're now just asking for your absentee ballot. So it is that same matching that you talked about.
Any more by the committee, anything? Then I might just have one more. I mean, you know, there are lots of rules out there and they make good sense. So like if I go to a particular establishment and I want a cocktail and they have a policy of requiring to ask for ID for anybody, I mean, I'm a little long in the tooth and I'm always like, really? But some places have that. And some places have policies that say, if you're like, if you look remotely close to being young enough, they'll ask for it. The point I'm trying to get at is my clerk's office knows everybody. They know who you are. And so it seems like it's a little bit of a barrier. I can see it where they don't know, but where they know you, it seems like kind of a odd thing to me. Please help me out.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, you should be flattered when they ask that question.
Thank you, Representative Knapp.
But I understand your question. My clerk I've known for 30 years.
Right.
We got a new clerk and I have 4 brothers that look pretty much like me. So, in these situations, I think we've tried to make it as easy as possible. And you see that in the 10 forms of identification that are allowed. I think we've made it as easy as possible for them to identify, but also having that one safeguard in just for that reason.
Anybody else? Should we go to Mr. Secretary? Hi, Mr. Secretary, welcome.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. This bill, House Bill 279, when we drafted voter ID, which is near and dear to my heart, there's a little bit of a loophole there that played out in the last election, which is when we drafted this, we wanted to bifurcate absentee ballots and in-person voting. Absentee ballots, voter ID attached to absentee ballots, requested remotely is a little bit of a different issue. But we wanted to apply voter ID to in-person voting. When someone comes, we want it to the polls or to early vote, we wanted to confirm that there isn't voter impersonation happening, and that's the intent of voter ID. But we saw in some jurisdictions, and I understand the way it was drafted, why it was interpreted this way by some clerks, is that some viewed it that an absentee ballot requested in person wasn't subject to the voter ID statute. So if someone comes to request an absentee ballot in person, which is still emanating from an in-person nexus, just like an early vote or a vote in person on the day of the election, they were able to, maybe the word is not get around, but they were not subject to the voter ID statute. Now, there's a couple problems with that. One, it really was not the intent of the bill. The intent of the bill that all voting that had a nexus in person would have this voter ID element. And then the second thing is it wasn't applied uniformly. I mean, one of the things that came out in the last hearing, and I think there's going to be some testimony remotely, this came out of Albany County mainly, where there were poll watchers 24/7 for the early voting period, and they did a wonderful job with that. And we heard about that this loophole was there. But in Natrona County, this came out in the last hearing, Representative Chadwick noted that when he voted absentee ballot, when he requested an absentee ballot in person, they did ask for his ID. It's a little vague the way the statute is worded, and I think it was not necessarily applied uniformly. And so, but even without that, maybe even if it was, which I don't think it was, looking at the anecdotal testimony, I still think it's good for us to close this loophole because the intent of the legislation was that all voting with an in-person nexus would require voter ID. And that's what this confirms. And it's really, I view it as a cleanup bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Questions from Mr. Secretary? Questions? Thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my apologies, Mr. Secretary. Sometimes I just need to catch up a little bit. So
That's okay.
I think the way I understand this bill is if I request an absentee ballot at home, it'll be sent to me. If I go down to the courthouse to get that ballot, they're going to ask for my ID.
Mr. Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, yes, if it's
Okay.
an absentee ballot requested off-site via phone or the different methods, then you will not be asked for an ID. That's a separate issue. Some states have gone down that route. Very separate issue. But the way it is worded right now, if you vote in person on the day of the election, you're required to show an ID. If you vote early at the courthouse, you're required to show an ID. But then there's this weird loophole where if you request an absentee ballot, but it's not requested as an early vote, meaning you're going to take it off site and you are in person, you technically don't have to show an ID. And this is closing that little loophole so that all voting with a nexus in person requires an ID.
Thank you.
And we're very supportive of that, of this bill.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Mr. Secretary? Did you does Mr. Rubino?
No, I think we're good.
All right, great. Who else would like to testify? Let's hear from the clerks. Ms. Langford. And Representative Knapp, you can stay right there, please. Welcome, Ms. Langford.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Senators. I'm Mary Langford, and I have the honor of representing the county clerks of the state of Wyoming. My purpose here today is to focus on the administration of Wyoming elections, and particularly the requirement of presenting an acceptable voter identification to obtain an absentee ballot in person. That's what it is. The clerks have had the opportunity to review this proposed legislation, and we would be able to administer that. And we really have support this legislation. And with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Okay, questions for Ms. Langford? Were there any other clerks that were going to join us today, maybe remotely?
I don't know of any. Mr.
Kelly, is there
Chairman?
anybody remotely? Okay. Well, the only one left in the room is Mr. Winnie. We better get him up here. Are you going to decline, Mr. Winnie? I didn't think you would, sir. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I hadn't anticipated speaking, but when you get to absentee ballot requests from military overseas, they require a signature by a personnel officer or administrative officer. And my understanding is when you use the same kind of form as a private citizen, maybe you're in Kathmandu or something, you're required to get a signature of a consular officer. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Winnie? Thank you very much. Representative Knapp, you have anything else you want to leave us with?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Knapp. Committee, I think that's it for the testimony. What's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Got a motion by Landon. Discussion?
Question.
Can't we stretch it out a little bit longer? Thank you. Debbie, would you please call the roll?
Senator Barlow? Aye. Senator Boner?
Aye.
Senator Landon?
Aye.
Senator Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye. Thank you, Representative. And who do you have on this? Would that be Hutchins? Probably, or
Yes,
you'll work it out?
yes.
We'll have them get in touch with us so it might be today. We're
Coming up fast.
They're coming up fast.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Just let us know which one of these fine senators would be doing it. Well, committee, that's it. I don't have anything else. There are some bills that we possibly could get if the president's heart would soften and he'd open up his drawer a little bit, but I'm suspecting that we may be done. So I think, Debbie, when did we talk about having an interim committee meeting? Next week, Wednesday?
Yes, we did talk about that.
And so that would be at noon, I think, on Wednesday. Is that the 23rd?
Let me double check here just a moment.
The 24th is what day, Kelly?
That's next Friday.
Oh, so not till next Friday do we receive interim.
All right. So when was that proposal for interim meeting for, is that the following? We'll figure it out.
Following week, the 27th through the 3rd.
We may have a light week next week, so help folks to get their interim topics together and we'll just keep,
We can party late and come in late.
it would be different.
There you go.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we're adjourned. You guys are funny.